Every so often, I like to challenge myself in various ways relating to my computing endeavors. Sometimes I live in a terminal, sometimes I use old computers. Not this month. This month, I'm going to force myself to use Windows for 30 days. Nothing but Windows. I don't use Windows. This could get a little bit weird, but here we go. Brought to you in part by Pogo Linux, who they do sell computers and you can put Windows on them, but they have Linux right there in their domain name. If you go to pogolinux.com, you can spec out some of the beefiest, most righteously awesome storage and compute servers you've ever seen. And you can put them free, preloaded and pre-tested and pre-configured and pre-awesomed with all sorts of different Linux distributions. Find out more at pogolinux.com. All right. So, yeah, doing this is kind of a big thing for me. I'm literally going to be using nothing but Windows for the next 30 days, and I have been avoiding doing this exact little, I don't want to call it a challenge, but it is kind of a challenge, but this sort of endeavor for a long time. I've known I've needed to do this for years now, realistically many years. The last version of Windows I think I spent any real significant amount of time with was Windows 2000, which, well, you can do the math on that one. It's been a while. It's been a good, more than 15 years. I actually worked on Windows 2000. I was around back when it was called NT5. I worked on it and I was comfortable with it and I was familiar with it and I knew it well enough that I could say what was good and what was bad and all the ins and outs and the whatnots about it. And I've used versions of Windows, newer versions of Windows, but not for any real length of time. I mean, about 3 years ago, I did an article on the preview edition of Windows 10 for Network World that I was writing for at the time. And I didn't spend that long with it. I mean, I did use it. I did put it on actual hardware, and I did run it in a virtual machine, and I got to know it well enough to pass some real quick snap judgment about it, right? But that's it. Other than that little test, I mean, I have no Windowsiness around me anywhere. I am a Linux shop. Every show that I've ever produced for this show, every video, every audio, every clip, everything is produced on Linux using nothing but open source and free software. So I don't live outside of this world. My laptops are Linux. My little gadgets and devices run Linux. I run Linux everywhere. I do have, like, other operating systems I toy with, mostly retro stuff, like FreeDOS for old DOS games or emulators for Commodore 64s and that sort of thing. But really, that's about it. All my modern computing is Linux, and that's wonderful. That's amazing. It's served me clearly quite well because I haven't needed to venture outside of that realm in years. But the problem with that is when I'm talking to other people, when I'm trying to tell everyone else that, hey, Linux is the best, how do I know it's the best? I haven't been using the other ones. I can't honestly sit down at this point in time and say that other than what little I know and what I know about licensing and open versus closed source, I can't really say how great or how terrible Windows is. There was a point in time where I could authoritatively make fun of Windows or more importantly, provide people with counsel on the best way to migrate from Windows over to Linux or whatever operating system they're moving to. I can't do that anymore. It's been too long. I don't run Windows anywhere. How can I say that Linux is better when I don't know how good or terrible Windows is? So, in order to do this right, I'm not going to test out Windows for a while. I'm going to use it for 1 month, well, for 30 days, assuming, is this month 30 days? Is July 30 days? I don't know. I didn't actually look at a calendar. It might be one of those weird 31-day months. Who came up with those anyway? I'm going to use nothing but Windows. Nothing. I mean, full on, all the way, top to bottom, Windows. And that means the studio PC that's running right here is going to be Windows. My laptop and my tablet. So actually, for that point of view, I have an old ThinkPad, not that old, like couple years old, couple-year-old ThinkPad. And it shipped with Windows initially. It even came with a USB thumb drive to restore Windows. And of course, when I got it, I yanked Windows off there immediately, and I've had every Linux distribution under the sun on that thing. It's not a beefy laptop, but it came with Windows. So yesterday I preloaded it, I put in the thumb drive and restored it to Windows. And then I've got this old laptop here, this little Lenovo, I think they call this a Yoga. I bought this many years back, 4 years ago, 5 years ago, something like that, when I was working to try and get Linux up and running on some of the various Windows tablets that were out there. It was super cheap. I want to say I got this for like $80, something like that, right? Anyway, so I got this little tiny guy. I don't even remember when it was. It was a long time ago. And I've been putting various odds and ends Linux distributions on it since then. None of them worked all that well. These sorts of Windows tablets have been really not that well supported when it comes to Linux. So I kind of gave that project up and put this thing off to the side, and I simply haven't used it. So this weekend I plugged it in, charged it up because it was dead, and I found that I had a USB thumb drive to restore Windows to it. So I did that. It was a long process, but I got those up and running. So now I have a laptop and a tablet running Windows, and I haven't for years. So I'm like, okay, this tablet used to be running Fedora. For those of you who are wondering, the guy named Adam Williamson did a lot of work on getting Fedora up and running on a variety of these like old like Bay Trail and whatnot Windows tablets, and it mostly worked. There was some issues. The video acceleration wasn't working. At some various points, touchscreen wasn't working quite right. Wi-Fi was dodgy. Sound actually I think worked fine on that one. Anyway. But now Windows is on there again. After I record this session here today, I'm going to wipe out the studio PC. Yeah, this big old beast of a machine, my Wild Dog here, that shipped with Linux and has only ever run Linux, is now going to run Windows for the next 30 days, which somewhat terrifies me. This is the part I'm the most concerned about. But hey, other video and content creators run Windows, right? Why can't I? I can make it work. I can make it work. And I'm going to track things as I go. I'm going to track my productivity, ups and downs. And of course, for the first few days, it's going to be kind of hard to gauge with that because I'm getting things set up and I don't know where anything is and all that sort of thing. But as I go along, as I edge closer to 30 days, I should be able to get a feel for what environments I can be more productive in, which perform faster, which have better workflows and better tools available to me. And I'll be tracking the pain points so I can complain about Windows authoritatively or say, hey, Windows does this better than Linux. I hope we can get these sorts of features or strengths right over to Linux, right? Because then we know. Then I did the research, then I know. And I want to track the practical strengths and weaknesses, performance differences, stability differences, usability differences, and perhaps most importantly, I'm going to track my sanity, how I feel as I do all of this. Because when you're using these computers day in, day out, you want to feel good about what you're using, right? So I'm going to track that as well. And throughout all of this, I'm going to kind of pretend like free software and open source doesn't really enter into my decision-making process. We know it does. We know that's kind of a big deal for me. I'm going to just try and put that aside for the next 30 days in using these computers. The rest of my life, I don't know. But in using these computers, I'm going to try and not hold that against it. I'm just going to approach it from how is it to use these, assuming it's free or not free, open or not open. Just I want to ignore that part of it so that I can really give this an honest assessment from the point of view of using it every day. And so then hopefully the next time I'm sitting down with someone who's a video creator and they go, oh, I'd switch to Linux, but I just can't. The tools are just not available to me. It'd be too hard. The workflow change would be too difficult. It would take too long. I can say, well, you know, I was doing my full job that I do as a full-time job on Linux using nothing but free software. I moved over to Windows, and here's the changes I needed to make. Here's how long it took. And if you're doing that in reverse, here's the changes you need to make, and here's how long it'll take. Then I can speak a bit more authoritatively on all of that stuff. Because right now, I'm just throwing stuff out there and hoping I can help people. I need to be able to know flat out how they're doing things, what their workflow is like, what their pain points are like, and realistically, what they can and can't do between the two platforms. So this is really day one. This is Monday, July 9th. This is my first day. Technically, I started getting things installed yesterday, which was good. But today is the day that I'm wiping out the studio machine and putting Windows 10 on here. Luckily, Microsoft makes kind of I don't know if it's an eval copy of Windows available, but basically you can download an ISO for Windows 10, and then you have the option to buy it. And until you buy it, like, they disable like certain features, like the ability to change the desktop wallpaper or things like that. That's what I'm understanding from my reads. And Windows has usually been available as like a trial edition for the enterprise as well. So that makes it easy for me to put it on this machine here. And if I need to end up buying a license for it, I guess I will. I just hope I don't have to. Luckily, on those other two machines I owned, they came with Windows, and I was able to find the USB drive, so we're good there. So to start with, so these two machines I've put it on so far took forever to install. It was a royal pain. It was such an annoying process. To start with, it just was so slow. Getting Windows 10 installed on this little tablet or on that little Lenovo. The Lenovo laptop's a good example here, right? It's not a beefy machine. It's got like 2 gigs of RAM. It's got a variation on a Celeron processor in it. It's not beefy. However, I've put every Linux distribution you can imagine on there, and they run fairly well. And the installation usually doesn't take more than, 20-30 minutes or so tops, and then maybe another 30 minutes to update whatever packages need to be updated. Windows 10 installing, just restoring from that USB drive onto that Lenovo, literally took 5 hours. It was just sitting there slowly chugging. It was monstrously slow, and I don't know how much of that is Windows or how much of that is the drivers being used, or if it's just like some weird thing with Lenovo's restore process. I can't really speak to that yet, but man, it was slow. It was just, I assumed it was broken repeatedly. I was this close to just yanking it out of the wall and just assuming that thumb drive was busted. And I checked everything. It seems fine. It's up and running now. It just took forever. And then once I got these two machines restored to their kind of factory native settings, I needed to start updates, right? Well, this machine took, I don't know how long to update. It went most of the night last night. And the Lenovo was in a similar situation. It probably took a good another 7 or 8 hours with tons of reboots just to get things updated. That was a hideous user experience. It was awful. I mean, I'm used to... It takes me half an hour at most. I mean, and that's a stretch on slow hardware to install almost any Linux distro. Like this beefy one, the one I'm doing this show on. It's got, nice 16 gigs of RAM, great graphics card, good processor, fast hard drive. I mean, it is a fast machine. Installing a Linux distro on here, if it takes more than 10 minutes, that's a surprise. And then to update everything is less about the compute power or the drive speed and more just about your network connection. How fast does it take to download the updates from the repositories? And at most, you're talking about one reboot. At most, right? Maybe there's some kernel modules that need to get reloaded, etc. So you need to do a reboot. Maybe a new version of the kernel comes down. You need to do a reboot. One reboot. Download everything, apt-get updates, zipper updates, whatever, fed up, whatever. It updates fairly fast and gets rocking quickly. I was amazed at how slow this was. I mean, it was a brutal process. I do not know why Windows users would put up with that. It was hideous. We'll see how it goes on faster hardware. That's what I'm really curious about. I'm wondering, is this just something that just is always brutally, nightmarishly slow, or if it's on fast enough hardware, which this production machine for this show should qualify, will it go at a decent speed? Well, we'll find out. It'll probably still have to reboot 27,000 friggin' times, but there you go. Also, the drivers I found to be a real pain. In both of these cases, it wasn't too bad, but you know, I've got a bunch of peripherals, and then there was some sound issues on my laptop. I had to go get updated drivers from Lenovo's website. Again, it wasn't too hard to find it on their website, but the Windows update didn't find it automatically, and I had to go grab them. Like audio worked, and then after several Windows update, audio didn't work, and then I had to go get the updated drivers. Anyway, that was a real pain. I guess I'm not used to that anymore. There was a time when getting hardware working on Linux was a real chore. I mean, it was hard. Just to get Wi-Fi up and running, a lot of times in the old days required, you know, a fair bit of terminal wizardry. Not anymore. It's very rare that I have to do anything. And on that laptop, I never have to do anything. On this piece of hardware right here, this nice studio machine, I never have to do anything. I just get all the drivers. The Linux distro takes care of it. It's either baked into the kernel or they're available as a binary blob module or something. But usually they come right down in the repos, depending on the distro you're running. And it's fantastic. I guess I've become spoiled over the years. It went, I don't know when it changed. You know, I talked about this a little bit about a year ago when I did my pretend for Linux sucks for the last time video, where I talked a little bit about that, where it's gone from, oh my gosh, I can't get Wi-Fi working, to it's weird when things don't work. And that's really, it's been like this weird gradual process with Linux. And maybe it was so gradual, I just didn't notice it really. Like I didn't fully, like I knew it was happening, but I didn't appreciate it. And now here I am with Windows, and it almost seems worse than it was back in the 90s in relation to installing drivers. We'll see how it goes. I'm going to put this on the studio machine and we'll see how things work from there. So yeah, I'm going to do that this afternoon. I'm terrified of it. This machine is all backed up. You guys can't see it right now, but my desktop and everything is unusually clean on the studio machine. It is just totally cleaned and backed up. I've backed up in duplicate in some cases just to make sure, because I can't afford to have my studio machine out of commission for very long. But we'll see. We'll see how it goes. Now, this really is just me getting set up. And it hasn't gone great so far, but it is working. It's just been a bit of a pain and it's just taken a lot longer than it should have. It shouldn't be an all-day process to set up 2 little consumer-grade gadgets running Windows. So that's annoying. But if it ends up working well, then it's worth it, right? It's like if Linux took 24 hours to install, but in the end, you're left with a fast, stable Linux distribution that you can do your work on and really enjoy yourself, then it would be worth it, right? Then the install time and the annoyance of hunting down drivers or whatnot end up being worth it. That's where I'm at with this. I'm going to try and put the fact that the installation was dirt slow, like molasses slow. I'm going to put aside the fact that the Windows update is just broken seeming, and try and move on from that. I'm going to try and clear my head and see how it works. Because if these machines work well with Windows, well then, you know, it's worth it. It's worth the pain points. Yeah, we'll see. I'll update all of you as I go with this. I am 100% committed to doing it for 30 days. I can give you a roughly 100% certainty that at the end of 30 days, I'm going to be formatting all of these machines and putting Linux back on them. However, hopefully I'll be able to speak a little more authoritatively on the pros and cons of using Windows versus Linux for at least the type of work I do. And I'll get some gaming in there as well. If there's any things that you would like me to try, if you're a Linux person or you would think would be fun to see a Linux person try under Windows, feel free to let me know. Just toss me a line, toss me a comment over on Patreon in the comments section for this show, and let me know what you would like to see done, what you would like to see tested, and we'll give her a go. I'm not planning to do any hardcore like performance benchmark number suites. Other people do that. I find that boring. However, I will try and put together some performance benchmarks around the type of work I do: video encoding, live video encoding, and whatnot. I took some stats of a couple of Kdenlive Live projects, put those off to the side, and so I can reload those in the Windows version of Kdenlive Live, which to my understanding is rather buggy right now. So looking forward to that one, as well as a snapshot of doing this exact show in the software I use called the Open Broadcaster Studio. So I know exactly how much memory it takes, how much processor time it takes, all that sort of thing. So I know what the performance is real world for the type of stuff I'm doing. And I'm going to compare that, and we'll find out over the coming days. The craziest thing of this is this next Thursday, I'll have Linux Thursday, and I'll be recording Linux Thursday on Windows for the first time in history. A little secret. There's a lot of Linux podcasts and shows out there that still use Windows and Macs, even if they say they're not. I actually only run Linux, except for this month, for July and into the first week or whatever of August. I'm on Windows, baby. And yeah, I'm a little bit terrified. And this is brought to you in part by Purism, who don't ship Windows on nothing. They just Linux. In fact, Free Software Foundation approved Linux distributions ship on Purism laptops, and they've got a phone coming out, the Librem 5, which also, come on, Linux, awesome. Not Android, not something with a Linux kernel, but a bunch of other stuff plastered on top, but Linux like you know and love it. Linux with a repository and package manager. Linux with KDE and GNOME. Yeah, baby. Find out more at Purism, PURI.SM, and Lulzbot, the makers of the most awesomest, kickingest, righteousest 3D printers on planet Earth. 2 fun facts. 1, the Lulzbot people, big, gigantic supporters of open source and free software. In fact, they recently did a sale where they were giving a chunk of the sales of refurbished printers over the Free Software Foundation. They raised a bunch of money for the Free Software Foundation, thousands of bucks, sent it on over to the Free Software Foundation. Good on them. And 2, their phone tree system, it's my voice. How fun is that? You can find out more about their 3D printers over at lulzbot.com. And of course, if you want to get this show right when it comes out, if you're watching it and you're not a Patreon subscriber, like you're watching on YouTube or you pirated it somewhere, you can go over to patreon.com/Brian Lunduke, subscribe for a very small amount of money. Just like throw $1 or $2 in the jar, you know what I'm saying? It's basically a tip jar. And in response to that couple of buckazoids hitting that tip jar, that little clinkety sound, the system will auto-magically give you access to DRM-free downloads of MP3, MP4 versions of this show, RSS feeds for both, so you can have an audio RSS podcast feed for driving in the car. You can have an RSS podcast feed for the videocast version that you can hook into your set-top box on your TV or what have you. It's fantastic, and there's absolutely glorious, wonderful comments going on right now. Great conversations. There's over 1,000 people that are subscribed. It is absolutely glorious. I love it. Absolutely love it. You can find that link along with other stuff as well over at lunduke.com. All right. And of course, I would be remiss if I did not point out some of the most amazing Patreon supporters. This is just a small sampling of them, a very, very small sampling of just the top level Patreon supporters. I couldn't do it without all of you and all of the Patreon supporters, because let's be honest, every buck, every $2 counts when you're producing this sort of independent content. So thank you to everyone for pitching in. Thank you to the sponsors of this show. And Thank you to Microsoft for making Windows so I can use it all month. Yeah, let's yeah, let's go ahead and leave on that that note. Oh boy, this is gonna hurt so much.